If you're looking to learn how to create patterns to make beautiful clothes for your dolls, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Super Self. My name is Josh. I'm a grown-up doll collector and a hobbyist. In today's video, I want to share with you my tips and tricks on how to make patterns like a pro, part 2. This video came as a follow-up from one of the comments from Autoscanable who requested how to make pants actually using the same technique from my original video. Thank you very much for your comment. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Let's start with the basics about how pants patterns are created. Let's imagine our legs are these two cylinders. If we want to join them together, when making the patterns we should remove this union area. If we do that and look at them from the side, we will end up with a figure like this. However, the human body is not that simple. Continued with the flat image, let's transfer this rectangle into a human body. As you can see here, from all the curves on the legs and the hips, it's not that simple. That's why when making patterns we need to account for all those curves, especially because everybody is different. Depending on the curvature of the lower back, for example, you might need more fabric to be able to fill this shape. Also, depending on how thick the legs are, the distance between the center of the pattern towards the back might be bigger. And because of all of that, this is why pant patterns usually look like this, where the back pattern is bigger than the front. And once you have nailed that crotch area, which is usually the more difficult one, then you can make modifications to the bottom half as you see fit. For example, you can shorten the length and make caprice pants, or you can make the bottom wider and make bell-bottom pants, or like in this case I want to do, you can make shorts. This is really up to you and your creativity. In this video I want to share with you the method that I call the wrapping and tracing. So let's talk about the materials. You're gonna need, of course, a doll body or a muse, masking tape, a pencil, some measuring tapes, paper, a pen, a ruler, some packing tape, scissors, and kitchen cling wrapping. What we want to achieve is to create a cast on half of the body to in the end have patterns like this. To begin, we're going to wrap our doll and we're going to use the cling wrapping to cover her body on the areas where we're going to start taping later. This will help protect the doll's body and also will help us remove the tape with ease. You need to tuck it in so that it is as close as possible and as tight as possible to the doll's body. Once this is done, we're going to get the masking tape and we're going to start making small pieces and go around covering every area of the body like I showed in the previous image. What we're trying to create here is a cast of the doll's body where we are going to be drawing on top and tracing the guiding lines, and this is going to be our pattern in the end. Just go around and also make sure in this step to tuck in very tight and neatly the closest possible to the body to ensure that the shape is right. Now moving on to the tracing. We want to make sure we trace on the middle and on the middle of the back, as well as the seam on the side, which usually the dolls have this line. This is where they are closing the molds most of the time, so you can use that as a guiding reference. And I would highly recommend that you also do and trace the areas where the curves happen, where the joints are merging at the leg, at the hip. This way you can have a reference on where pieces are. In my case I wanted to make shorts, but if you want to make a full-length pant, then you need to continue with the cast until the ankle area or however long you want these pants to be. In this step you also need to decide to which level the waist of the pants are going to be. You know, they can be high waist, a little bit below in the middle, or also more on the hip area. Of course it will depend on the design and the creativity that you want to do. Here you also should mark the pleats if you wish to have some in the front. Once you're happy with the mold and the lines you've traced, it's time to remove this cast. And you can do so easier by lifting up the wrapping cling. You can actually get more space to push through your scissors without scratching the doll's body. I would also recommend you to try to do it from one of the side seams, whether it is from the inside of the leg or from the outside, whatever is easier for you, as this will allow you to just remove it with one cut. Now that the doll is free, let's remove the excess cling wrapping from the tape. So now that that's done, let's cut this cast in two. So we should have a front and a back panel, and we're going to do that by cutting on the side seam. If you remember from this image, the front has less curvature compared to the back. What that means is that the front panel is going to sit flat from the beginning. However, for the back panel, we will need to do some releasing of tension in order to be able to make this pattern sit flat. To achieve this, we're going to draw a line from the middle of the waist to the highest point of the curvature. Once you cut that line, you would end up with something like this, and now your pattern can sit flat. Now it's time to move to the next step, and we are going to transfer these patterns from the masking tape into a piece of paper so that we clean up the shapes, the curves, and everything else. I will recommend you to add as much detail as possible, transferring the guidelines that you have made for the waist, for example, or where the curvature of when the joints of the leg and the hip meet, so that you have a better idea of where this exact part of the pattern is going to be on your doll. Here's an extra tip. I wanted to add a pleat to the front panel, and I wanted this pleat to be the size of the negative space between the hip and the waist. To do that, I need to measure that space, and I will define where this pleat is going to go, in this case on the middle of the leg, and I need to transfer that into the pattern. So I included this on the seam line from the side. I measured that distance, and then I put this space in the middle where I wanted the pleat to be. And with that transfer of space, I have basically been able to achieve some additional space in this pattern. As an extra for my design, I wanted to add a characteristic where it should have an A shape. This is why I needed to add on the seam also some extra space at the bottom and have this triangular shape so that it can actually have this A shape in the end. Here I'm showing you just how much you can play a little bit with the shapes in your patterns to achieve the results based on your creativity or the project that you want to have. I think for pants, one of the most specific area that you need to try to maintain as intact as possible if you're not experienced, it might be the crotch area, because I find that the most difficult one. I also added a little pocket. This is not necessary, but I added a little pocket there also for the shorts, and you can see here the difference between the leg cast pattern and the modified pattern from what I actually want to achieve for my design. Just remember to have some fun and be creative and achieve whatever you want. Everything is possible, so just play a little bit. We are using just paper for now, so I try to play a little bit with. I also wanted to include a tips and tricks section, so I hope you enjoyed this part. So one of the final steps after you have done drafting your patterns in this recycled piece of paper, we're gonna do a little upgrade in comparison to the last video. Thank you to Kimita Lewis, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Kimita Lewis 86, she left a comment suggesting to actually kind of laminate the pattern using packing tape. So I went ahead and did that. I included a little bit more detail to this, so I added already the cuts need to be made with a little X, and I also made sure to be very specific for what this pattern is for, because if I forget and I laminate it, it's going to be harder to write down on top. It's not going to look as clean. I think it's a really nice look. It looks really sharp, really clean, really nice, and durable, because basically we are laminating these patterns and it can be used later on. Yeah, so let me know what you think about this new tip from one of the viewers in the community. Thank you very much again for that. Now, with that said, let's go transfer these patterns into fabric and get right into sewing. Remember to choose the right fabric for your project. If you want something really tight and it doesn't need to have some details like leggings, for example, you can just use a stretch fabric. If you don't want to have a bulky look, then you should keep in mind this and try to use a thin fabric. The most important thing is that when working with dolls or in smaller scale is that the proportions should always look right. For example, this fabric with this checker pattern that I choose, which I love, frays a lot. So after transferring the patterns into the fabric, I like to do a little zigzag stitch so that I make sure that when cutting and working with it, I would keep the fraying to the minimum. There are many other techniques that you can use for preventing fraying, but this is my preferred one. After doing the fray check zigzag stitch around the pattern, then of course you can go ahead and cut your patterns and make sure to prepare them properly before you sew the pieces together. Remember to pin your pleats. This will make easier the sewing of the waist. Depending on your design, probably the best way is to start by sewing together the side seams. Next, you want to move to the crotch area and the waist. It will depend on whether the closure is going to be on the front or on the back. And the final tip for this video, always remember to press your seams, as this gives really an extra finishing that looks more polished. So I was absolutely in love with this fabric and how these pants turned out, and I decided to also do some trousers for my model Tate. Here you can see him. I think they also turned out really great. I used exactly the same technique, and here you can be the judge of it if you like it. I actually really love it. I used a different material for the belt area in comparison to the trouser shorts. I still use the velvet for the pockets. I love the contrast in the fabrics actually, so it's looking really great. I feel like her pants are giving me a little bit of Tom Brown vibes. I also did these two tops. I saw this red transparency fabric that I had around, and I just said, okay, I need to make something out of it to match, and I thought it would match perfectly for this specific project. So here you have it. This is how they look. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, it really helps the channel. Also, feel free to let me know in the comments which one you like the most. See you on the next video.